Welcome to The Marinade, a free-flowing conversation about the creative process with creative people. Each episode, we welcome musicians, actors, comedians, authors, visual artists, filmmakers, anyone who creates art to talk about how and why we make stuff. This is part 2 of a bonus series where I am talking about the best live shows, or at least my favorite live shows I saw in 2024. 2024 was probably the hardest year of my life, and I'll try not to belabor that point throughout this conversation, but it just has to be said for context. And so I leaned really hard into music, both writing my own, acquiring physical copies, going to shows, making the Marinade. That was really my savior throughout the year. And thankfully, for the record, I'm doing a lot better now. I feel good. Life is pretty fantastic for me at the moment, actually. But as I look back on that year, I'm like, damn, there were some moments I really needed. I'll start with a happy one, and that is at a really good point of last year. The summer, it was in June. It was June 4th, actually, of 2024. My dear friend and collaborator, Jen Ross, called me and said, hey, you want to go to see the Rolling Stones tomorrow? And I was like, yeah. Now, this is a tough call because I was about to head to Kentucky and Tennessee, which I'll talk about in a minute. And I was in a relationship. I was very much in love. It was a relatively new relationship, so we were still kind of feeling each other out, understanding each other, getting into our rhythms together, and I knew she wouldn't be happy about me going to, she had to work that night. I knew she wouldn't be happy about me going to the show, but I was hoping she'd be supportive, and she was. And I'm so glad I went. I mean, to see this, I'd never seen the Stones before. I mentioned on the last installment of this, I saw Dylan earlier in the year. So I got to see two legends, aging legends, in the same year. Every time I've done that, I've been grateful that I did it. You know, I've been fortunate to see some true legends of American music. I've seen Waylon Jennings several times before he passed, and he's one of my all-time favorites, incredibly important artist for me. I've seen Merle Haggard. I've seen Don Williams just before he passed. I've seen on and on and on. I mean, just legends of American music, especially roots music. Of course, the Stones not being American, but being legends, I was just completely blown away by their energy, how good they sounded. It was a gorgeous night. Tyler Childers opened, and I was always like, I really like his last few records, basically his sober records, and I enjoy his other stuff, don't get me wrong, but there wasn't something that snapped in me about Tyler like he has for so many other people until I saw him live. And then I was like, oh, I get it. And then, you know, I've since said that to a few people, and they've told me that some of those early shows, even when he was drinking, like those early shows, it was a spiritual experience because there were smaller rooms. This was at a stadium, Camping World Stadium here in Orlando. So it's a stadium show, but man, what did he bring it. So that's my first one I wanted to talk about, Rolling Stones in June of last year. And then I went to Bonnaroo, and I know I talked about Jason Isbell and the 400 unit last time, but I'm going to use them as kind of the jumping off point for talking about Bonnaroo as a whole. It was a magical time. This is my second year covering Bonnaroo. This lineup from last year was like, especially Sunday, was like tailor-made for me, right? I mean, pretty ideal. Jason Isbell is my favorite songwriter of all time. Getting to see him on that stage after I had seen him in the smallest venues for years and kind of seen the rise of the 400 unit to see him there was incredible. Bonnaroo as a whole was magical. I was very much in love. She met me there. I'd been on the road for a couple of weeks doing what I call my grounded summer tour, getting back to my roots in Kentucky and just having some time to process a lot of shit that I needed to process around mortality and love and life. And it was incredible. I mean, that relationship ended for the reasons that relationships end, right? So like there was a fair amount of, bickering and fighting and that kind of thing in the relationship. But that weekend, no. No, we were just in love. And I got to sit down with Milky Chance and interview them for the show. I got to see S.G. Goodman. I got to see Cigarettes After Sex. We went to see Megan Thee Stallion because my girlfriend really wanted to see her, and which was great, by the way. I didn't know what I was getting into. It was a lot of fun. And she was just like my girlfriend at the time was just on fire. She was having so much fun. And at some point she like ripped open my Pearl Snap. And then during the Jason Isbell in the 400 unit set, she like ripped my shirt, my undershirt. So I was just standing there with my shirt open. Just one of those like fits of excitement, I mean, she was a spark plug anyway, but it was fun, it was sexy and fun. And then it was cool too, because like she got that I wanted to just watch this show, right? Like she would come over and love on me, but then she was kind of doing her own thing, and I got to hold her while he played Cover Me Up, and the tears flowed. And I mean, I look back on that experience so fondly. Bonnaroo was a beautiful time and a really great creative time for me. When I got back, that relationship ended, and I really struggled for the month of July, mental health wise, because then I was processing 2 breakups. But I look back to June as a beautiful, beautiful time of my life, where I think something about the Marinade came into view for me in terms of what I want for the future of the show. And when I got back, I treated it like a job as best I could until the relationship ended, and then I struggled, a lot. But for the most part, June and the beginning, at least, of July was just very fertile creatively. I wrote a bunch of songs. I was really pushing the Marinade, recording as much as I could. Just a great, great time. So that's Bonnaroo. I got 2 more for you that I want to talk about. One is Joe Pug at Tuffy's Music Box in Sanford, Florida. That was in January. I can't seem to find the exact date for some reason. But it was, my friend Peter flew into town to stay with me. I was still living with my ex of 10 years, and that was pure hell. So Peter came down to hang out with me and go see Joe Pug. And Pug is one of my favorite songwriters of all time. A creative hero of mine. He's been on the podcast before, and this time he agreed to sit down in person, which was so great. I had really started to lean into fashion as a coping mechanism, like a healthy coping mechanism for dealing with the breakup and kind of reinventing myself and thinking about who I was as a single man in his 40s and moving forward. So I was like all dressed up. I had my hat on, my leather jacket, looking sharp. And there's a woman outside. I forget her name, and I apologize to her. I don't know if she listens to the show, but we follow each other on socials. And she's kind of an influencer, I guess, in that area, in Sanford. And so she's like, she sees me walking up and she starts videoing me, asking me about what I'm wearing. And it was just like a fun way to kind of be welcomed to Tuffy's. And then to sit down with Joe, and he was just so cool and open. We got some cool photos from that time, Peter did. Just a great, great time and a great, great venue. I love Tuffy's. Shout out to the folks at Tuffy's. It sounds good in there. It feels good in there. It's an unsung venue, I think, in Central Florida. Lots of great acts come through, though. John Moreland's going to be there, and Jordan Foley's going to open for him coming up in about a month from when I'm releasing this. So if you're in the Central Florida area, y'all, check that out. I think there are still tickets available. And if not, well, don't sleep on it next time. Joe's set, though, y'all, like him and a guitar. I've never seen him with a band. I've only seen him in a guitar, and only a couple of times. This is the first time I think I've ever seen him headlining. I've seen him open. I caught him open for Steve Earle when he kind of got his start back in the early 2000s. And it was incredible. I was blown away, hooked immediately. His ability to weave, this is something I think about as a performer. His ability to weave stories into the set is second to very few, if any. Joe's. There's this one that he tells about drinking on Bon Scott's grave with Justin Townes Earle. And he has a whole life full of stories like that, right? And he's just an interesting guy, a sweetheart. He's been so generous to me and the Marinade, and that night was no exception. So that's Joe Pug at Tuffy's Music Box. And I got one more for you. Jonathan and Abigail Peyton with Rambler Kane at Cafe 11 in St. Augustine, Florida. Great venue. September 2024. It's a tiny room. This was a seated event with tables. I got a spot right up front. Rambler Kane opened. We've kind of become buddies. He's from Jacksonville. Absolutely outstanding singer, songwriter, guitar player. He kind of plays guitar a little bit like Justin Townes Earle. That very unique kind of style. His songs are fantastic. He commands a stage. It's interesting because he's a very humble guy, but he still commands the stage. So you can tell he really genuinely appreciates every single person who's there and listening and paying attention. And I love that. So do Jonathan and Abigail. And I've gotten to know them a little bit over the year, this past year. I interviewed Jonathan for the podcast back in January or whatever it was. His record that came out last year is one of my favorites of the year. Maybe my favorite of the year. If Moreland hadn't released his record, Jonathan's might have been my favorite. And that includes American Aquarium and so many other great records that came out. But he's just they're both such sweethearts. And I've gotten to know him a little bit. We've interacted quite a bit on social media. I also, they played Laurel Cove Festival in Kentucky, and I got to talk to them and hang out with them for a little while there. During their set, so Rambler I can't imagine having to follow Rambler. Only Jonathan and Abigail can do that, apparently, and they did in an amazing way. This was right after the hurricane, one of the hurricanes that came through this year that really hit us, in one of those big old Cat 5s, and the power went out, and the AC wasn't working anyway, so it's sweaty in there. We're all kind of, we're all packed in together, and the power went out, and they just kept singing. They just played the rest of the set unamplified. You couldn't have drawn it up any more beautifully. The whole thing. And then I got to talk with them, and again, they couldn't have been sweeter. So, Rambler Kane couldn't have been sweeter either. Just a wonderful, wonderful night, y'all. I had driven down to St. Augustine, or up to St. Augustine for it. Really grateful that I did. I can't say enough about Jonathan and Abigail and Rambler. Also, Cafe 11. I always stop in there and have lunch or brunch the day after I go to a show in St. Aug, or if I visit for any reason. I like to camp at Anastasia State Park. I'll actually be going there for an Isbell show in April. Looking ahead, by the way, I don't think I'm going to cover Bonnaroo this year. I'm going to try to cover Laurel Cove again. The Bonnaroo lineup isn't geared toward me. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. I'm sure if I went, I'd have a great time, but it's the same weekend as Laurel Cove. If it wasn't the same weekend, I would do both again, but I think, the Laurel Cove lineup is like geared toward me. Ian Noe is headlining. Caitlin Butts is going to be there. I'm excited. I'm really excited. Bill Taylor, again, who blew me away last year and I talked a lot about, and it's getting some just press. And there's just something special about that festival anyway. So I think I'm going to go again to Laurel Cove instead, and skip Bonnaroo this year. But I'm going up to Nashville to see Isbell solo in March, and then in April I get to see the 400 unit in St. Augustine. Also going to see the Drive-By Truckers in a few weeks in Tampa. And I'm going to sit down with Matt Patton of the Drive-By Truckers. If you've subscribed to the Patreon, you already know that. I'm really excited. Speaking of the Patreon, y'all, $2 a month. You can get Patreon exclusive content like my show Jason's Journey, where I talk about the moments that shape my creative life and provide a window into the process of making the marinade. Just $2 a month, y'all, and it supports the show. All the money goes right back into the making of the show. If you want to help us out, but you don't want to commit to a monthly subscription, I totally get that. You can just Venmo or PayPal us. It's at The Marinade, and all the money goes right back into the making of the show. I have one more announcement, and then I'm going to let you go. That is, please go over to YouTube and subscribe to The Marinade on YouTube. I am starting a series inspired by my dear friend Kevin Maines, where I talk about records. It's that simple. It's just short videos, no more than 10 minutes. And I'm just talking about my favorite records. I don't know where it's going to go. So far, I've just kind of been talking about records from my collection. I'll probably do some reviews of new albums as well there. I like to do that kind of thing. I've done it in written form for a long time, but I'm having fun making these videos. So go check it out, subscribe, and then click the like button on all those videos if you could, please. Leave a comment if you particularly dig it. It makes a big difference. I hope y'all will like it. I think you will. And then stay tuned, y'all. We have so many things in store. I'm really excited. Until next time, go out and create something. Cheers, y'all.